got along fine before that. We'd gotten along for 3 or 4 years before we made that album, so.
Let's pigeonhole this band here. Let's say they are dysfunctional. Let's say they fight amongst themselves. Let's say they're not necessarily getting on. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we get such great music. Whatever. But like, is it good in some ways in terms of this is a clip on which to hang Smashing Pumpkins? Do you think it was looking back maybe?
No.
No.
Not in any way.
No.
Well then, do you think it was bad?
Yeah, I mean, it was a misconception that made our lives miserable, and it was...
And we're still living in the misconception.
Yeah, it's
Because
like...
we're talking about it right now.
I know, but we're talking about it in terms of the past. I mean, we are talking about it in terms of the past. Because we are saying now that everything's cool.
I mean, unfortunately, a lot of those things have been over for over a year by the time they came out in the press, and then, you know, it's just rehashing stuff that really is irrelevant anyway.
Yeah, but...
Ultimately, what goes on between the four of us is really nobody's business.
Right.
Ultimately, what is people's business is what we put out and what we have to say about it. But the interaction amongst us, and the reason I'm saying this is because we decided that we had to protect each other. You know what I mean? That what we have between us is a sacred thing, and that we cannot so easily crack the doors open and let people jump in and make judgments about it. We want people to stay focused on what's important. The only reason people are interested in us is because of our music. No one's been interested in us because of our dysfunctional natures.
Well, hold on, that's not strictly true. That's not fair. Let's just say in the 70s, or like even before that, let's just say the Beatles, let's just say Led Zeppelin, whatever, right? Was it just the Led Zeppelin album, say, that you might have liked? Or did you want to read about maybe, like, The Chariot of the Gods, a book like that about Led Zeppelin on tour? Did you want to know what Jimmy and Robert were up to?
Sure, yeah.
Well, then, are we not allowed, since you're...
Doesn't mean you have to fully answer that. It doesn't
No,
mean,
but
doesn't
the
mean
same-
you have to write Hammer of the Gods for the people. I mean, if you don't want to, if you choose not to play that game, you don't have to.
And I'm saying we
Okay.
don't have to feed the machine of that. And we made the mistake of feeding that machine.
Right, but the same token, if the machine ran on its own steam, say, in other words, if journalists just decided to go for some story or whatever, or find out a bit more about Smashing Pumpkins than just what Smashing Pumpkins, say, deliver to people, is that okay by you?
I mean, what we're talking about here is, by the sheer nature of you know, this thing that we're doing is, it's people living vicariously at some level through, you know, what we're doing. So we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. We want people to live vicariously through our music and our emotions, but we don't want them to pry too deeply. So we're talking about the subtle balance between being a public person and still having a private life.
Fine. Okay, but then, just take the approach to the album itself. I mean, the last time I spoke to you, you were talking about the very fact that, like, you might have an album out that did very well, like Gish, and it was sort of given #1 in college radio for that year, whatever year that was, 91 or something like that. Now, the thing about it is, did that lead you into some form of lethargy in some ways, in terms of, hey, you know, we could easily bring out Gish too, or in the case of Melancholy, you could bring out Siamese Dream too, if you like, and just stay with what is successful, because there's enough people who will surround you that will say, stick with the familiar, because the familiar makes money and the familiar makes success. But the only thing that would make you happy is to what? Break more artistic boundaries.
Yeah, it never made us lethargic musically, but it did make us somewhat lethargic when it came to practicing, getting together, and that's where a lot of the root of that evil started. But I mean, we've never been musically lethargic. I mean, we've always been moving ahead. We would never even dream of making Gish 2 or Siamese Dream 2. It would never cross our minds.
So if you think the words like arrogant or gloomy that have been given to Smashing Pumpkins, do you think you've basically been misunderstood?
I think anybody can be arrogant or gloomy, you know. I think everybody's arrogant and gloomy at some point in their life, but I don't think everybody's that all the time, and I know we're not. So.
Now, the thing is like, we have a pantheon of archetypes, and, you know, we have, you know, who's the pop female diva? Well, it's either Mariah Carey or Madonna. You know, who's the you know, the male torch singer? You know, Michael Bolton. You know, we happen to fall in the category of the, you know, the enfant terribles or whatever. You know what I mean?
Les Mis.
Complaint rock. I heard that song.
Right.
Clueless. In the movie
that's
Clueless, you
good.
call it Complaint rock.
So, you know, one band's activities in this manner is perceived as being irreverent and breaking the boundaries, and another band's behavior in this manner is perceived as arrogant and conceited and pompous. So, basically we're behaving the same way. It's just the basic perception of us that falls into whatever convenient archetypal category is necessary for this particular moment.
Yeah.
But for a band that writes the kind of music that we've written and plays the kind of concerts that we play and has reached as many people as we've managed to reach without huge, top 40 type hits, to this point, we haven't had a #1 smash worldwide single that sold all our records. Our records have sold because of our music and what we represent. It's obviously more than that. It has to be.